Hi everyone and welcome to yet another video by Cookie. Today it's going to be like something a little bit different from my usual podcasts. I'm going to make a video discussing bankruptcy and bankruptcy warring and bankruptcy building. What it is and when you should do it, what you should keep in mind doing it, stuff like that. So first of all, what is bankruptcy war? As I'm sure most of you play the game in multiplayer have realized, you'll sometimes take loans while warring, especially in player wars. It's more of a rule than an exception. And I'm sure you've also figured out that you'll eventually bankrupt. So when do you bankrupt? You bankrupt when your loans, the interest here, is as high or higher than your total income. Then you can't take any more loans. And once you can take no more loans and your treasury drops to zero, you go bankrupt. There are some bugs with this and it can occur in other circumstances, but it's very, very rare. So, bankruptcy war came in as a concept because as you now realize, the amount of loans you can take is based on your income. If your income drops, that means that you can take fewer loans before your interest hits your total income. And so that means that if you expect that you'll have to take out all your loans to fight a war, or you'll need as much money as possible to fight a war, you need to do this before your income drops. The most common source being that someone occupies you. So say that Aragon here, I'm using Aragon as an example because I think it's like a suitable nation to do it with, not because I think it's like a good thing to bankruptcy war France here. I actually don't think it would be an amazing strategy in this position, purely because France is so overwhelming that it wouldn't even hurt France to do so. But anyways, where was I? Yeah, so if France was to attack Aragon, Aragon would want to take out all his loans before France managed to occupy something, since the occupations will lower the tax production and trade for Aragon, lower his total income, and meaning that he can take out fewer loans. There are also other sources that can lower income. A very common one is disloyal estates, especially burghers, going from 20% trade efficiency, if this is high enough, to minus 20 if it's disloyal, is a huge hit. And something so you definitely want to take them out before you're about to be hit by events and such that will lower your income. Same for the clergy with tax, and in some cases even if you're about to get high war exhaustion, since this will reduce your goods produced. So yeah, that's the basic concept. When do you want to take out all the loans? When do you want to bankruptcy war? So essentially, obviously anytime you will have to bankrupt anyways, but when will you have to bankrupt? I mean, this depends on your income and your expenses. Like some nations have more disposable income that they can allocate to paying back loans and stuff like that. But somewhere if you have an interest or expect to have an interest that's above between 1/4 of your total income and half of your total income, I would say that you're better off bankruptcy warring, as it will simply take you too long and hurt you too much in the long run to sit around for tens of years to pay off all your interest. But yeah, this varies from nation to nation. But essentially, when you can't pay off all your loans in a reasonable amount of time, or you expect you'll take that many loans, just bankruptcy war instead with them. What else is there? Yeah, that's pretty much bankruptcy war for you. So essentially, take out your loans before you get occupied or lose source of income to maximize how much money you can take out. Worth mentioning that after 5 years, you will be asked to refresh the loans or pay them back. If you bankruptcy war, you want to simply choose to renew the loan, since if you pay it back, you won't be able to take it out again, as your income will be lower, but you can continuously refresh it every 5 years, as long as it's out there. So yeah, and bankruptcy building is sort of the next stage to this. It's people realizing that, yeah, I mean, when I take out maybe 1/4 of my loans or half of my loans, I'm not going to be able to pay them back in a reasonable amount of time. But I actually didn't need to spend all the money in the war. Like, let's say you take out all the loans here as Aragon. So yeah, now we're taking out all loans. We have 8,000 ducats. Now, assume that we were to fight France, and let's say that we expect this war to maybe cost us this war and the interest we have to pay for the next. Let's say that war is going to last 5 years. Is what we expect. We expect to have to pay for our troops and our interest, maybe about 4,000 ducats for the next 5-6 years fighting France. And after that, we could obviously fight this, and after we're done with the war, we bankrupt. But then we waste 4,000 ducats, as we'll still have 4,000 ducats in the bank. And if we try to build buildings with them, they'll be removed due to the 5-year rule. So what we do is that when we bankruptcy build, is that we expect that we won't be able to spend all our money efficiently in a war. So we start the war out by building a lot of buildings. As you can see, you typically want to do this with the 12-month buildings, like this, but you can do it with forts or even manufactories for longer wars, especially if you have a higher income to stay afloat. But yeah, what we do here is that we just go, let's build some barracks, you know. And yeah, that's, and maybe like, can we build anything more? No, that's fine. And now we spent 3,000 gold on infrastructure. We can still use the 5,000 gold to fight France, and after this is complete, we need to wait 5 years. So on the 2nd of January 1499 is when we can bankrupt. Before that, we don't want to bankrupt, even if war with France takes a short time than that. We just want to stay afloat and then bankrupt right after these buildings finish. And you can see this here when the buildings finish. So you want to wait for at least 5 years before bankrupting. Because if you wait 5 years, buildings completed before 5 years in advance of your bankruptcy will not be removed when you bankrupt. And that's bankruptcy building for you. Now make sure that you save enough money for the war you're going to make, and like maybe have 1,000 cash extra at least, or later on even more. Keep a good amount, because if you are forced to bankrupt before within the time period before this finishes and 5 years after, you will lose all your buildings, and the whole thing will be a giant waste. Other things you can do, if you see that you will have money left anyways, since you are saving some money, and you think you won't be able to spend it all before you're going to bankrupt, just, you know, hire some advisors, pay them up. If you have money left, yeah, why not? Go wild, you know. Maybe this guy wants to be a level 4, you know. Obviously you wouldn't do this with only this much money, but if you had a higher income and hence higher treasury, you could just, yeah, essentially find ways to spend your extra money before you bankrupt, ideally. And yeah, as stated, keep a safe margin. Bankrupting with like 1,000 or even 2,000 ducats left in your bank is way better than you bankrupting before the 5 years are up, and hence getting all your buildings removed. So yeah, that's bankruptcy building. And lastly, I want to mention some things about safe bankruptcy. Obviously, when you bankrupt, you lose all your mana. So before you bankrupt, you want to make sure to spend all your mana on stuff like tech, IDs, maybe even buying down inflation, as you'll get it quite high when you do this, or other things. Now, if you want a stable bankruptcy, you can choose to stab up to 3, as you will lose 3 stab from bankrupting, and remove some war exhaustion. If you're about to lose a war, this will also remove war exhaustion for you, so worth noting. So this is one option, and it's a good way to spend excess admin and it if you already have the IDs and tech and inflation at a good level. That's what I like to do before bankrupting. Now, a more advanced technique that you can do if you don't want to spend, or you don't have the admin and it to spend on this, or your country is in shambles and you don't have the, you have this stab it out, so you're at -3 stab, for example. If for whatever reason you can't or you don't want to stab up to +3 and lower war exhaustion before you bankrupt, in that case what you want to do is that you want to break to rebels. Now, breaking to rebels is normally something that most people find terrifying. It's a fairly advanced technique, and I will only touch on the surface on it. So, if you want to do this yourself, you should probably try it out in single player a few times. But essentially, when you are not at war with a nation and rebels occupy half your country or more, they will instantly enforce all their demands. Now, this sounds terrible, right? The point of rebel breaking on purpose is that you spawn things like nobility, maybe burghers, maybe pretenders, some type of rebel that's relatively harmless, and not separatists. It won't break your country away. And then you make sure that these are the only rebels in your country. And once they break your country, meaning they occupy and instantly enforce their demands, which usually is some prestige clause and some autonomy, things you can deal with, they will instantly set your war exhaustion to 0 and your stability to 0. And this is a mechanic designed to try to bounce a nation back, but you can abuse this design by purposely spawning nobility rebels or being in a civil war, spawning pretenders, stuff like that, to intentionally get your things occupied. It should also be worth noting that breaking to rebels is a good way to get out of various disasters, like for example Peasants' War. If peasants enforce their demands on you, the disaster will end without you having to fulfill the end requirements. Civil War will end if the pretenders enforce demands and stuff like that. But you should also note that this reset to 0 war exhaustion and 0 stability only happens if they break your country, meaning occupy half or more than half of your country. It won't happen if, for example, the pretenders march straight to your capital, you siege this down, and then, based on the timer, enforce their demands. So you need to have half your country occupied by rebels. And yeah, I think that's it for me. If you like this content, let me know, and maybe I'll do more in the future. See you around.